everyone. I think I'll get us started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lorelei Stewart, director here at Gallery 400, and I am super excited to have you all here to experience our wonderful guest, Carolyn Castaño. Carolyn's Voices Talk is presented by UIC Gallery 400, our co-sponsor, the UIC Latino Cultural Center, and our partnership project, the UIC Building Climate Resilient Spaces project, which has funded tonight with support from the Frankenthaler Foundation, Climate Initiative, the Richard Driehaus Foundation, and Chicago's Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. So I'm really pleased for multiple reasons to introduce Carolyn Castaño. Carolyn and I started early in our art careers together in San Francisco in the 1990s in what was an extraordinary and formative time. And now we're working together because UIC Gallery 400 is presenting Carolyn's first solo show in Chicago, which will be this summer, opening in late May. And we are just super excited for the exhibition and thrilled for you to be here tonight. Developing a show with Carolyn makes so much sense at this time for Gallery 400. Firstly, she's an excellent artist who works across painting, installation, video, and artist books. She explores the legacy of colonialism, industrialization, and capitalism on human and other than human kind. And as she will share tonight, central to her work are her family's migration from Colombia to California, as well as Colombian cultural heritage and its changing landscape. So briefly about Carolyn, she was born and raised in Los Angeles, where she now lives and works. She has presented solo exhibitions at the Craft Contemporary in Los Angeles, the Orange County Museum of Art, and her work has been featured in group exhibitions at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the 56th Venice Biennale, and most recently in Bay Area, then at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco, which is a nod back to the 1990s San Francisco. Last year, Carolyn was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship, and she had previously won a Joan Mitchell Foundation grant in 2013, and fellowships from the California Community Foundation and the City of Los Angeles. She holds degrees from the San Francisco Art Institute, RIP, and UCLA, and is now a professor of drawing and painting at Long Beach City College. Please help me welcome Carolyn Castaño.
Thank you, Lorelei, and thank you, UIC and Gallery 400 and everyone at the gallery for welcoming me and bringing me to Chicago. A little bit about, well, Lorelei said it all, but yes, I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and my family is Colombian or identify as Colombian American. And how do I do this? Go back. Okay, go back. My practice, I like to say, is centered in painting and drawing with a sort of kind of a parallel or auxiliary practice in, in video and installation and sculptural works and artist books. So, I guess, let's see a little bit, my kind of current body of work or practice can really be traced back to about 13 years ago when I did a residency in Medellin, Colombia. My family lives in Cali, which is the third largest city, and Medellin is the second largest city. I had proposed to do a project working with women affected by the narco trafficking violence, and the residency that I proposed this project to is called Casa Tres Patios, or the house with 3 patios or 3 yards, and they responded well, we have many groups that support women, but they want you to know that they are not women who work in narco trafficking, but are perhaps affected by the violence created by the narco trafficking culture or business. And so, and I said, yes, actually that makes sense. And I went to Medellin and I worked with about 20 women from a nonprofit called Mujeres que Crean, or Women Who Create. And they're all are and were women who were affected by Colombia's 60-year armed conflict that is in repose, but perhaps ongoing in other ways. And during that project, we talked about their experiences as women who had left the countryside, looking to recreate their lives, escaping violence, but also about the environment that they came from. Many are, well, like one woman was from a place called the Parque de las Orquídeas, the Orchid Park, and her husband was a ranger who took care of this area, and she lost her husband and her son and her brother to the violence. And so it really sort of struck me like their relationship to the environment and to the landscape. And so together we made a video about their experiences. They chose artworks to interpret, artworks that represented women from Western art history, from Colombian art history, and the women and myself made drawings of the birds and flowers that are native to Colombia, birds or flowers that maybe they knew about from music, from poetry, from just folklore. And so I took all of that material and brought it back to Los Angeles and made it into a kind of animation. Sort of maybe now when I look a little bit rough animation, but I thought we could check it out. Uh-oh. Open in Safari. Yes, let's go. go back. I don't know how I go back.
Oh.
Okay, thanks. Whew, okay. So that time and that experience working with the women from Mujeres que Crean was very fruitful. From that project, I made a series of light boxes based on watercolor, gouache, and acrylic drawings that were portraits of the women that correlate with the video. These are some film stills. And then this is from an installation where I first showed the project in San Diego, California at the New Americans Museum. But that project really brought me to honing in or clarify the kind of work or the themes and subject matter of what I wanted to explore in my work. Many of the women came from villages and towns surrounding the Magdalena River that cuts through Colombia, its main waterway, or water freeway, as some folks refer to it, from the Caribbean Ocean all the way down to the south, bordering Ecuador. This is a watercolor and gouache drawing of kind of a metaphorical river called Paradise. It was also the time when I came back about 6 months later, a year later, while I was working on the project, that I had my first son. And as many, mothers, artists, or artists who become mothers, right? I was worried about continuing my practice and being able to work. And I started to make what I called kitchen feminist artworks. At night when everyone was asleep and my son was asleep, I was able to work in the kitchen table, making my watercolors, objects that were portable and could fit on the kitchen table and could be quickly put away before anybody got up or started crying. But it was also the time that printing that was consumer accessible, like digital printing, sublimation, fabric printing, became available. And so I was able to turn something that was modest, 20 by 24 watercolor drawing, into a large scale printed textile or fabric. This is a curtain piece that was at the New Americans Museum as part of my show. And it's called Paraíso, Paraíso, or Double Paradise. And so it was kind of a big evolutionary moment in my practice where I realized I don't always have to suffer or make these gigantic things, although you'll see that I go back and forth, but I could make something that is more humble or accessible or quick, and then use kind of collaborators out in the world. The curtain was also inspired by a, let's say, queen or sort of critical artist of Colombian art named Beatriz Gonzalez, who just passed away. And she made this piece in the 60s called Decoración de Interiores, or decoration for interiors, or an interior decoration. And it's a screen printed wall-to-wall curtain installation that she made using a photograph that came out in the newspaper, and that's the photograph of the Colombian president at the time. Maybe this was, I'm sorry, maybe it was in the 80s. But he's shown having drinks and singing opera at a fancy party, as the elite in Colombia and all over the world are, while the Colombian society is going through immense struggle and economic strife, and the elites are having a party. And so she said, like, well, they're kind of like just decorative items. Let me make a curtain out of them. But I also thought it's an interesting feminist piece in relation to my Paradise and my work's connection to the women of Mujeres que Crean, who are in the theater in a domestic space at home, but also the theater of war. And so my curtain became like a theatrical curtain, but a domestic object, and something that referenced their home space, which was the land and the landscape. So then fast forward to Alexander von Humboldt, who you have a park, right, and a statue to Alexander. And so his work has become very influential in my work. He was a Prussian botanical scientist and explorer who traveled the Americas, taking measurements, making drawings, collecting flowers, plants, all throughout Latin America. And so there's statues even here in Chicago, in LA, in California. There's Humboldt County, Mexico. And so I really became interested in his cataloging or describing of the landscape and my own relationship to that landscape, right? And to the history of Colombia. So Albert Berg's work, right, he was sort of a rock star of his time in the late 1700s, and spurred all of these artists and such traveling to the Americas, making paintings from drawings or other found or collected imagery. And so this is Albert Berg, who was a British artist, and it's called Physiognomy of Tropical Vegetation in South America and the Magdalena River Valley from 1854. And so there are a series of lithoprints of the Magdalena River, and while I love the lushness and the Edenic quality, I noticed that they were perhaps missing all of the violence and the history of the Magdalena River, of colonialism, of Colombia's history. This is the Magdalena River again. The Magdalena is also the site of many unclaimed deaths because of the conflict, the armed conflict, the narco-trafficking, and other conflicts. So it's often been told that people might find a body floating down the river, and they're claimed and they're known as NNs, or no names. And so in my version, this is my version after Albert Berg. I copied his drawings and his composition, but in my version I included some of that violence of the Magdalena River that Albert Berg didn't include. And so we might see a hand here or a head there floating down the river. So, and then these are watercolor and gouache and acrylic, and they're about 5 feet by 7 feet watercolor paper. This is in the Sur Biennial at the Manhattan Beach Arts Center, and the Sur Biennial is a biennial that takes place in community colleges and sort of more, maybe not quite community centers, community colleges, some state schools in Southern California, and it hosts artists who make work or reference in their work Latin America or our relationship to Latin America. And so it acknowledges that Los Angeles, San Diego, and Southern California is indeed touching, right, Mexico and Latin America. And so you don't have to be Latino or to be in the show, but you have to sort of consider or acknowledge that relationship. So fast forward to Frederick Edwin Church. This is the heart of the Andes. So Frederick Edwin Church traveled to Latin America and Colombia and Ecuador and made many grand romantic paintings of the Andes, many of which were composed kind of pre-Photoshop of sketches and small studies and paintings that then he would paint back at home. So I guess going back, I've kept going on my path of representing the landscape and thinking about Colombia as one of the top 5 ecologically diverse places on the planet with vast water resources, gold, coal, emeralds, all kinds of minerals and such. And many of these paintings do not represent that, but they're definitely an advertisement of the time for what you would find there. So in my work, I combine all of these different elements of the landscape, symbols and shapes from the Andes and Colombian iconography, textiles, ceramics that reference the natural environment as a way to connect with these ancestral voices or this history that of people who are in me and part of Colombian culture and identity, but are sort of relegated to the side as is common throughout the world. So these are some different pictographs and petroglyphs in Colombia. It's like, what is the difference? But that are found in the Colombian landscape, images of birds, this V kind of symbol, the spiral image, symbols that mean life, fluidity, fertility, marriage, that reference the sun, the moon, and such. And so, and then these are textile patterns and motifs found in the Wayu mochilas, which I've always been very attracted to since I was like a teenager. And they also use these different motifs, but I was interested also in their use of color that's very pop and psychedelic and modern. So fast forward to the Ruana and some of these sort of sorry, I'm gonna make you guys dizzy today. These kind of V shapes and compositions found in the petroglyphs and in other kind of objects from Colombian culture comes the Ruana, which is a poncho style garment worn in the Andes and actually throughout the Americas. So these are some early kind of images of folks wearing the Ruana. The image on that way on the right is kind of a Colombian or Andean countryman with a rifle and a measuring element. And so it is still a garment that's worn today by folks in cold climates like here in Chicago, but also maybe if you're an elite with your suit, you might wear a Ruana over your suit jacket. So we see the Ruana style. And so it has its connection to ancestral or indigenous roots. The early Ruana versions were called tocapus, which were like tunics with geometric patterns worn by the Incas and communities in Colombia as well. So this is like more of a contemporary city lady wearing a Ruana. And so I took the Ruana shape or the V-neck, the cutout of the neck, and also some of the shapes found in ceramics and petroglyphs and such, and made those kind of the armature of a body of work called Tropical Geometries. And they're landscape paintings of a Colombian-inspired landscapes, but with the V shapes that come from the Ruana as a kind of interruption into the Western horizontal format of the landscape, or an opening, a vortex, a more kind of speculative interpretation of the landscape. And so these are also works on paper with gouache and watercolor and acrylic. And so for a lot of these drawings, I'll research flora and fauna native to Colombia or to a specific region, but also maybe intermix more fantastical or made up fluorescent kind of psychedelic flowers that are more my own visual language. The body of work is called the Valley of the Sun, and it was inspired by this structure called the Temple of the Sun by the Muisca, who were their descendants continue to inhabit Colombia. The Muisca were present during the Spanish colonization, and this is in Sogamoso, Colombia, which is like the eastern kind of part of Colombia, and it's a sun temple, sun worshiping center. And so from that, I made this series of works that center the sun shape as its organizational strategy, and also this kind of V or parallelogram opening up or closing. I've also really been interested in alchemy and the language of alchemy, the representation of alchemy as an early science or sort of a predecessor of contemporary science. It was a science, sort of a magical, fantastical exploration of minerals. And so thinking about those elements of alchemy, the sun shapes also come up in alchemy. So this is almost like a scientific or botanical illustration, but maybe like a planetary illustration of planets blooming from other planets. So these are some native birds of Colombia, and birds that migrate to from the south to the north and back, like the western tanager, which is the orangey one there. And then the orchid trianae, which is the national flower of Colombia. So kind of a different body of work that dovetails into the landscape is a body of work that I'm calling family futurisms, and it started during the pandemic, I first showed it at the Orange County Museum of Art. And in family futurisms, I took my father's collection of photographs or photographic archive. This is my father in Los Angeles overlooking the Hollywood freeway in 1962. And an ID photo. And so my father was a self-taught photographer who started his own business, printmaking business in LA's MacArthur Park, which is a kind of hub of Latin American immigration, and immigration actually from all parts of the world in Los Angeles, also current site of much ICE activity. But he opened up a shop in MacArthur Park called Kalima Graphics, RIP, and fashioned himself as a photographer for hire and would photograph weddings and birthday parties, ID photos, also photographing the family throughout time from the 1960s all the way until he passed away in 2011. And so after he passed away, I was able to get my hands on all the photos, right? And really kind of play with them and see what was there. And what I saw was that it's an archive of a family, an American family, throughout an expansive time from the 40s and 50s in Colombia to moving to Los Angeles in the 60s, evolving with the times, also different photographic materials from Brownie cameras and 35 millimeter Super 8 to digital and different formats. And so this is kind of a small selection. And then there's also many objects in the archive. Collection of passports. This is a postcard of MacArthur Park in Los Angeles, which I got recently, and a photograph that I took of MacArthur Park. But the show at OCMA, or Orange County Museum of Art Expand, its temporary location was called Cali is Cali, and Cali es Cali is an expression in Cali, Colombia, which is like our English version of there's no place like home. But my Cali is Cali played with Cali of Colombia, but also Cali of LL Cool J's, going back to Cali. And so I collected imagery of Cali, California, and Cali, Colombia, and thinking about the kind of play with words of the way immigrants travel between two places at one time, and really juxtaposed my father's photographs with my own painting practice, and his photographs in Colombia with his photographs in LA, and found myself to be, these are in Cali, probably like the 80s. And I juxtaposed his photographs with photographs of Los Angeles. So the picture on the right is a picture of Cali, and then this one, on this side is the picture of downtown LA by the Bonaventure, if you've been to LA. And so I thought, like, wow. And so I had to drive down to downtown LA, and was driving back and forth trying to find this place. And I'm like, it's in Colombia, because the mountains are all wrong, right? They're in the wrong place. And kind of the freeway and the road. And so, well, we'll go back. So that brought me to different images and objects in the archive in my mother's house, objects that I grew up in. This is a photograph of the Cali airport, and it's modernist chairs and architecture. And I thought of the time when we lived in Colombia, when I was a child, and sort of it's the 1970s, and thinking about Colombian or Latin American approaches or understanding or embracing or manifestations of modernism or development. And so this is a painting I made called, I forgot what it's called, but it's called Los Farallones, which is the mountains that surround Cali, but the geometric shapes and colors are inspired by the kind of modernism or the colors that I saw growing up in Colombia when I was a child. And also these fiberglass chairs, which were made by my father in Colombia, in LA, that were part of a business that he and his best friend had in Colombia of modernist knockoff furniture. And so at one point when they closed the business, my dad brought the chairs back to LA, and he made one in our backyard. And so this is part of an installation of the show of Cali es Cali, and thinking about this idea of the modernism and Latin American kind of inventing or making do with what we had. So I don't know if he thought of them as like modernist or anything, but they were definitely part of his artistic practice, and they're knockoffs of the pill chair. So the work has moved around and had different configurations. This is at Pasadena City College, and it's called Cali es Cali otra vez, or again, because the first show at Orange County was shut down because of the pandemic. And by this point, I had kind of moved around the photos and the artwork and really started to make relationships between them. So the image is my dad at the beach in Long Beach, California, next to my painting, and a bird from the Colombian landscape that migrates. A postcard that my dad sent my mom from LA to Colombia. And then my tropical geometries inspired by the Ruana shape, with a photo of my aunt Fabiola coming off the plane into LA holding a Ruana that was passed down through the family, and which now I have. And here's the Ruana. So this is an installation of the photos and the paintings. This is a photo or an image of the migratory routes from Latin America through to North America, migratory and routes of trade, which I think are very interesting or important to look at, and to think about migration as something that is has been happening for a very long time, and that continues to happen, right? It's not this new kind of aberration of humankind, but something that's actually part of what humans do. This is more kind of details in the archive. There's passports, airline tickets, luggage tags. And this is one view of the photographs with the drawings and this kind of pinboard of combination of all of the different images together. These are a collection of ID photos of my dad and mom and different relatives like grandparents and aunts and uncles. And then that's me at the bottom right and my brother above. I had a display case of objects that were passed around in my family that you know, maybe are not significant to anyone else, but I thought of them as kind of objects. I came up with this crazy title, which I could never remember the titles to my work, but the title is something like Objects to Help Us Remember Where We Came From and Where We're Going. And they're different objects, like my dad's like probably fancy dance shoes, and his camera and glasses, and a Thomas Brothers map, which is very Southern California book of maps that we don't use anymore, but you would put in find your address, your street with its cross street, and like DF, and be like, there it is, go this way. Some doilies that were knitted by my grandmother, my dad's immunization card when he came to the U.S. His collection of passports, from Colombian passports to the U.S. passport, and a pamphlet with my uncle's poetry. And this is a video that I made for the show called Intercambio, a cultural exchange or interchange, cultural exchange. And it's very simple sort of intervention. It's a Super 8 video of the family, my family traveling from Los Angeles to Miami, stopping at different kind of tourist sites like the Alamo, the Grand Canyon, the Fountain of Youth in Florida, Cape Canaveral. And then on the right is an American or Anglo family from Connecticut, the Barstow family, and they're traveling through Colombia, going to different sites there. How are we doing on time? Okay. A little bit more. These are from a series of paintings called Future Rwanda, and they're 60 by 48 inches, so not huge, but large enough. And they start to combine the sun shape from the sun temple of the Muisca with the geometric patterns of the Rwanda, of the early Andean region geometrical patterns, and also textiles that are reference textiles from found or appropriated fabrics found at thrift stores or fast fashion outlets like Forever 21. Also RIP, I loved you, but you're no longer here, and your clothes don't fit me. But and then appliques, which are from LA's fashion district, made by immigrant labor, also reference nature and the environment. Different. And then these two, this is an exciting evolution. I worked with a friend who's a seamstress to convert fabric that I made using screen printed images from the photographic archive with watercolor painting and appliques into ruanas. And so these are hung textile pieces that are like a kind of ruana, but also maybe a jersey that says 1962 Los Angeles. And then this image brings me closer to the current body of work. It's an image of my family in Colombia at the Rio Pance, which is a river near Cali, and the family, including myself, that's me and my mom, at the river having a barbecue. It's not quite a barbecue, but we'll call it a barbecue, but enjoying the river. And so for Colombians, going to the river is like Californians going to the beach, or maybe Chicagoans going to the lakes, right? It's part of family life, and so family activities and recreation. And so thinking about our relationship to the landscape, to the natural environment. And so a few years ago for the show at the Craft Contemporary, I was invited to do a show and to consider my work and how I would apply it to an exhibition there. And I was thinking about the glaciers and the landscape that I grew up in looking at when I was a child in Colombia. And so it took me to the Nevado del Ruiz, which was a glacier, volcanic glacier that erupted in the 80s. Maybe some of you remember. And it was very tragic, which obliterated the town of Armero. And I had set off to do a project about El Nevado del Ruiz and Armero, and thinking about the power of nature, and maybe something like nature always wins, but nature doesn't always win. And so I decided that I didn't want to do that, but it took me down this rabbit hole of thinking about the glaciers and researching them and learning about them. And so I made this show called, or this project called Cumanday, Beautiful Mountain. And it's inspired by, it's inspired by the glaciers in Colombia and their melting, story of their recession of sorts. So originally there were 13 glaciers in Colombia, and throughout the 20th century they've been melting or no longer classified officially as a glacier, or they no longer have ice. And so this is the Volcán Cumbal and the El Paramillo del Cisne from 1960. And Cumbal is, let's see, 1985. And so altogether there's 13, and now there's 6 left. And so these are small watercolor drawings of the glaciers, and they're from reference material, books, and online imagery, and some visits to the Nevado del Ruiz. And so really they became almost like a love letter to the glaciers. We'll go back to this one. The whole series is called, this is dedicated to the one I love. And I think something about sitting quietly, very much a pared down approach than my regular paintings. I started to feel like the paintings themselves were like a prayer or a love letter of, I was having like an Emily Dickinson kind of moment with the paper and the watercolor materials, and thinking of each glacier as I was painting them. And this is a totally different approach. This one is called Cumanday, a Beautiful Mountain, and it's after El Nevado del Ruiz. And it's mixed media, watercolor, gouache, acrylic, on paper that's cut up and reconfigured onto the canvas, and also acrylic on the canvas with sequin squared patterns. And then also there's fabric that's kind of woven into parts of the landscape. So all together, it makes a kind of a new dimensional landscape. These are some details. And kind of think about, like, when I'm making one of these paintings, I think of the painting as a way to reference different, kind of like an information map of sorts, albeit a very kind of like homemade one. There's the grid pattern references the Wiphala flag, which is the flag of indigenous nations in Latin America or South America, and thinking of them as guardians of the landscape, of the environment. But it's also the sky blue to orange and red hot is referencing the climate conference colors, their kind of identity logo. This one is Chondua, after the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, which is on the Caribbean coast. And so for the show, I also made my first large-scale ceramic sculpture. The sculpture is of Madre Monte, or Mother Mountain. And Mother Mountain, or Madre Monte, comes from Colombian folklore of this kind of a woodland goddess who protects the environment, but also expresses great wrath at destruction of the environment. So there's tales of men disappearing in the jungle or in the forest, loggers disappearing and such. And so my Mother Mountain is holding the birds and the flowers and surrounded. And she's kind of a combination of Mother Mountain, but also the mountain representation of the mountain. And so many of the mountains are also referred to as mothers or fathers or elders. This is a sculpture in Colombia of Madre Monte. She's usually depicted as very angry. And then this is El Volcán de Santa Isabel, which is a small version of Santa Isabel, but I'm working on a larger version, a panoramic. I should say these past paintings are about 12 feet wide, so they feel, or I'd like them to feel, almost theatrical or panoramic, maybe embracing the viewer or giving you the feeling that you're in the landscape. But in this version, this one is smaller, but it's Volcán de Santa Isabel, which is the volcano mountain that's part of the Nevados area or park, and it's the one that is predicted to lose its ice cap in the next 10 years due to climate change. It's already actually lost one part of it. So I'm making a painting about Santa Isabel. These are some early paintings, watercolor paintings by Manuel Maria Paz, who was part of the Comisión Coreográfica in Colombia in the 1800s, which was a project by the Colombian government that set out to document the Colombian country, right? The landscape, the geography, the people of different regions. And so Manuel Maria Paz made these paintings that include many of the volcano glaciers. Happens the same. This is a picture of the páramos, which are these, I'll describe them as like wetland landscapes or kind of desert wetlands, and they're below the glaciers, or are fed, the water from the glaciers feed the lagoons and lakes of the páramos. And the páramos have these kind of cactus trees that are called frail johns, but the páramos are very rich in water, but also in minerals. So there's some páramos that are being exploited for their mineral content and hence polluting the water, and the water that's received by towns, right? It's like a mountain where the water's melting, feeds the páramos, the water feeds the rivers that then feeds the towns. Well, some of the water and the glaciers are drying out. That is, so the water's not getting to the towns, or the water's polluted by the multinational mining companies. These are some of the animals that are native to the Páramo region. The condor andino, different folks. And then I've been studying and trying to think of well, this is a kind of mapping of Santa Isabel, different areas. This is like part of the ice that's left on the mountain itself. And kind of a graph showing the decrease, right, of the ice, right? In 2006, starting very blue, right? And then getting lighter and lighter with less, the ice is getting smaller. Different. And these images are from the Colombian Geological Institute, IDM. And that's it. Okay. So, thank you.
So if you have a question, we ask that you use the cordless mic. Anybody have a question or comment? John.
I really like the juxtaposition of the geometric forms with some of the more floral iconography in your work. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about the significance of the geometric side of things. I feel like I got a sense of the other part.
Yeah, I mean, I think well, I mean, as a painter and an artist, I've always been, you know, maybe when I was younger, very attracted to and interested in the geometric, the patterns and the colors of the textiles, like the Wayu mochilas and textiles. And my family would always bring me a mochila when they came to visit. And after a while, I was like, oh no, not another mochila. But fast forward to really like looking at them and thinking about the shapes and their relationship to, I mean, obviously like modernism, and they're doing their own thing, or they are referencing kind of like the colors or I mean, it comes from different sources. It's a combination of people are affected and influenced by popular culture and popular art, like the color let's use fluorescent, yeah. And Amazonian pop art or commercial art, Caribbean commercial art, the way people paint their speakers, and kind of street culture, but also how it how it relates to, or it's in opposition to maybe our history of geometric abstraction and painting. So that's like one part of it. I mean, like this is the kind of the painting or art that I maybe was exposed to as a child, right at home with these mochilas, and maybe visiting family in Colombia or other, even going to Mexico or parts of Latin America. And so in my paintings, I think I'm, you know, looking at my mochila and looking at the pattern of like the garment of the ruana or the poncho, and thinking of, you know, kind of mashing them together and but to make a new painting, and thinking about those patterns as other ways of creating a landscape that are maybe a form of resistance, a form of opposition, or in conversation with. So, yeah.
Anybody else? Can you talk about that with the Wiphala flag and the origins of that flag, or like what it references, and then the way that you're using it in the paintings? Because it seems related to what Jonathan's asked.
Well, yeah, and so the grid pattern is a pattern that I'm kind of fixated on now or more that's been evolving, but the grid pattern comes from like the Wiphala. I mean, it comes from different places, but the Wiphala flag is the sort of a national, or it's kind of like our rainbow flag, a flag of identity, pan-identity of different indigenous cultures, and it uses a repeating square pattern, or sometimes it's triangular, but with a rainbow of colors. But that geometric pattern is like the geometric pattern that is found in different pre-Columbian, pre-Columbian architecture in like the Andes in Peru and Bolivia, or in Mexico. You have these blocks of rock, volcanic rock, that are creating these temples and such. But the grid pattern is also like the mosaic tile pattern of my grandmother's house. And so it kind of comes from different places, but in the painting, I'm thinking about like that kind of that pattern. I mean, it's very basic, sort of throughout the world, and the square, right, goes way back in time, but thinking about it's that repeating square pattern as an ode to or in conversation with these communities that are guardians of the landscape and the environment in places like in Nevado del Ruiz and such. So,
thanks. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn.
okay.
We're looking forward to the show.
Someone has to say it now backwards. The whole lecture. All right. Okay. Thank you.